exciting thing about Judaism because there's multiple right answers to things. But when we differentiate between law, you refer to the Shulchan Aruch, versus Midrash, versus custom, and differentiating between custom and law and things like that.
Okay, so there's a multifaceted question. Question is, how do we deal with disparate opinions with regards to law, but with regards to philosophy
that are all
as well?
Sacred, that are all part of our sacred tradition.
Yes. So I think that the way to break it down is, first of all, you have to understand that the Vilna Gaon famously said that there is never a conflict amongst a custom and a law. So if there's a custom that's been adopted by the Jewish people, it won't violate any law. Additionally, there's no conflict between Aggadic sources. What does it mean, Aggadic? So the term Aggada or Aggadata, it's an Aramaic word for like Haggadah. Haggadah means like teachings of philosophical and ethical realm. And then you have Shmaitza or Halacha, which is more law, practical. Now, in Aggadata, in ethical and philosophical parts of the Torah, then even though you may see things which seem to be disagreeing, they're actually not disagreeing. There's no real disagreements in Aggadata because it's like you said, it's different facets.
Can you give us one example of Aggadic? I mean, just I don't know to help maybe somebody.
I learned this yesterday. I was talking about this. Three things come. That's fine. Three things come suddenly. Three things come suddenly. Talmud says. What are the three things that come suddenly? Mashiach, Mitzia, which means finding a lost object, and Akrav, and a scorpion. Scorpion bites suddenly. That's obviously not law. It's not like saying, here's how you wear tefillin. This is how you strap tefillin on your arm. So this is what a mezuzah looks like, right? It's more like an idea, right? What does that mean? What does a scorpion mean? What's going on there? Another one of my favorite ones that Dan heard my class on. Three things are a measure of the world to come, right? Shabbos, Shemesh, which means sun, and Tashmish. So what's Tashmish? So the Talmud says, does Tashmish mean intercourse? Well, no, it can't mean intercourse because that weakens someone. Rather, it means removing one's bowels. What does that mean? Is that law? No, that's an idea. It's an idea, and if you have an idea that seems to be in conflict, it's not actually in conflict. These are ideas, and the difference between these ideas and law is that the intention of the authors was polarizingly different when they wrote law versus philosophical Aggadata. As you'll notice by the two examples that I gave, it seems like it was an idea, but it was shrouded. Like, what does this mean? Three things come suddenly. Mashiach, finding a lost object, and a scorpion bites suddenly, doesn't give any forewarning. That's obviously a lesson, but it's clearly being disguised as some sort of statement that you have to try to figure out what it means. It's not clear on the surface what the intention is. Or like the other example that I gave, and there's thousands of examples of Talmudic and Midrashic statements that say ideas, but oftentimes there'll be parables. There's a lot of analogy, and the intention is actually specifically concealed. As opposed to law, it's very much the intention is to be revealed, to tell us how we're supposed to do. You find a lost object, as an example, right? There's pages of Talmud that say everything, every particular situation that may happen, what you find, where you found it, what the situation was, like how do you deduce what you're supposed to do when you find a lost object? If you find $20 bill in Manhattan, you keep it. Why? Because number one, it doesn't have any identifying marks, so the person lost it won't know that this is theirs. Number two, the person gives up on it because they knows that he drops it in the thoroughfare, right? Number three, if you leave it there, someone else will take it. So these factors are all discussed at great detail with the intention of making as clear as possible, in the most detailed fashion as possible, what the law is. That's with regards to Shmaitza, with halacha, with law. As opposed to with Aggadata, or philosophical, ethical law, the intention was to conceal it. Why was the intention to conceal it? Because we don't want the secrets of Torah to be out there. Like, we don't just throw them out on Facebook status updates. It's an idea. It's an idea that Torah wants us to internalize. It's an idea that's That's a deep, profound idea that we don't just give it out for free. It's not like we're handing out. It's not like a lemonade stand that we're giving out precious wisdom. It's something you have to. If you want to learn it, you have to try to figure out. Well, what does this mean? Three things come. What is a scorpion? These are really intelligent people. What are they just trying to tell us? That be careful. Like scorpions don't give you a warning before. Maybe is that really what it's all about? To put that together with Mashiach. What does that even mean? Find the lost object, like that's that this is something which is perplexing by design. Now, when we find disagreements, we won't find any disagreements in the Aggadic, because if the disagreement by definition is it's two different lessons. So the disagreement is only on the surface level; it's only on what you see, but actually on the deeper level, what they're actually trying to convey, but they're hiding it, is two distinct lessons. Now,
so you can learn two different things.
Two different
that are
ideas.
not in conflict with each other.
That's right. Now, with regards to law, we do have some conflict, and we'll have disagreements as to what the practice ought to be. For example, I think I went over this with no, it was a different group. As just by way of example, we know that if I have a son who was born on a Saturday morning, so 8 days later is also Saturday, because you can count the first day and count the last day, right? So the Torah says you do the bris milah 8 days later, right? 8 days later. Problem is 8 days later in Shabbos, and one of the prohibitions on Shabbos is against causing a wound that draws blood. So how do you do bris milah on Shabbos? You have a conflict. So the Torah says, Ubiyom Hashmini, the Torah specifically says an extra verse that you're allowed to do the bris milah, the circumcision, on Shabbos. That being said, there's a disagreement as to how far does this extend. According to Rabbi Akiva, it means just doing the actual circumcision. According to Blazer, it means even chopping down trees to make wood, to burn the wood, to make coals, to make a blade to use for the bris milah. So it's a disagreement in law. So that's one example, but there's hundreds of examples. So your question was, how did that happen, or what do we do about that?
What do we do about it? And I think what you've answered is that we study it deeper to...
Yeah, but it's more than study. It's like, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
So there's a very, very highly detailed, systemized method of how we actually derive halacha. For example, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the houses of Shammai, houses of Hillel, where the law is like the house of...
Usually Hillel.
Usually Hillel. There's 18 exceptions, and the Talmud tells you that these are exceptions. And Maimonides tells you these are exceptions. And Maimonides has instructions of how we derive law. Rav and Shmuel, right? The famous combatants or sparring mates in the Talmud. We know that the laws are like Rav in these areas, monetary laws, and the laws of Shmuel in ritualistic laws. And Rab Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva. We never go like Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar was put into excommunication. We always go like the plural, like the majority always rules, right? If the opinion of the Mishnah is stam v'achar kach Mishnah, if we just have a Mishnah without any authorship, depends. So does the opinion, differing opinion come beforehand? The differing opinion come afterwards? A good source book for this would be, if you take the first book of the Talmud, which is Masechet Brachot, talks about the laws of Brachot. It's the beginning of the agricultural laws, but also the laws of blessings, the making of various foods. And all the Rishonim, almost all of them, all of the commentators of the 10th to 15th century have introductions to the book of Brachot, and because it's the introduction to the Talmud, they'll each give their treatise on how halacha is derived from the Talmud. It's almost never derived actually from the Talmud itself. That's why we have books like Maimonides. Maimonides made a book to try to take all the opinions of the Talmud and synthesize it into what the actual law is. For example, you may not even know that there's a disagreement in the Talmud, because the Talmud doesn't do necessarily all the work for you. It expects you to be a scholar to know that if there's a statement by one rabbi over here, that there may be a different book somewhere else where there will be a disagreement. So it's not organized by the Talmud is not organized by topic, and the Talmud it meanders a lot. The Talmud goes in various disparate directions, so you might not know. It's also very hard to keep track of what we're talking about, and is this the only place that we're talking about it? There may be other places that we talk about it as well. So that's why we have the the works of the Rishonim to organize and collect all the rules about how we learn the law, and they organize that's their one of the major contributions that they did to Torah literature. That being said, I think this is always important to mention that you say, "Oh, Rabbi, you just spoke so long. It's such a mess. There's so many arguments." It's very important to remember this one point, that the arguments are never about the core aspect of a certain law. Everyone agrees that we do circumcision. Everyone agrees what circumcision is. Everyone agrees to do it on the 8th day. Everyone agrees to do it on Shabbos. Everyone agrees that there's no problem doing it on Shabbos. The question is, when the Torah gave us a exemption of the laws of Shabbos with regard to circumcision, how far did that extend? Is it only for the things that we're allowed to do on Shabbos? Or is it even for things, only things that we couldn't have done otherwise before Shabbos, like making a blade? Or does it mean that you're allowed to do anything? Is it with regards to circumcision? Shabbos is like a Tuesday. It's just a very, very fine agreement on a very fine aspect of it.
You go to Kroger's and pick up the
bagels. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So that's the example. It's always on the core laws, on the reasons behind the law. Everyone agrees, and there's never any debate. Debate are the most fine aspects of the law. Like, for example, when you have a bread that has a certain measure of sugar or sweetness added to it, when does it go from a hamotzi to a mazonos? Right? That's a very it's just about according to the Sephardim, they never have ed challah. If you know Sephardic customs, they never have ed challah because the Sephardic opinion is that even if it's a little bit not just pure flour and water, they're worried they won't be able to make hamotzi. So if you ever go to a Sephardic family for Shabbat, they'll notice that they'll have probably a water challah, as opposed to the Ashkenazim or the Ashkenazic Rishonim commentators. They'll say, well, if it has a little bit of sweetness or other non-water and flour ingredients, it's still fine unless it's very sweet. Remember, everyone agrees you have to make blessings. Everyone agrees what the blessings are. Everyone agrees that if you add a certain ingredients that are not flour and water, you potentially could change the blessing. The question is, how much? Is it almost anything? Once again, very, very minute aspects of laws. Yes.
I have a question. This might be totally off the wall, but I've never been to any of your classes for subject experience. When you were talking about the bris,
Yes.
how come then you don't sit shiva on Shabbat, but you can do a bris on Shabbat?
Well, there's a lot of things you can't do on Shabbat.
Well, I know that, but I mean, if you can cut.
Yeah, but that's because there's a special verse in the Torah. The Torah has an extra verse. Uba Yom Hashmini, right? The Torah says that, this is in Leviticus. It says a woman has a baby, she has a baby boy, and she should be tmeya for 7 days. On the 8th day, they do the bris milah, do the circumcision.
Shiva for 7 days, though.
Well, yeah, but let me hear me out here. Now, it says an extra word. The Torah doesn't say any extra words. But when it says an extra word, because it's reminding you of a special exemption to a certain law. It says on the 8th day, when it could have just said on the 8th. Why? How do you know that would be a reference to the 8th day? Because it just said 7 days. 7 days, and then it could have said on the 8th. It says on the 8th day, an extra word to tell you that even on Shabbos. So therefore, it's a special exemption. And therefore, we don't know why. The Torah doesn't tell us why. It doesn't say, this is the reason why. It just says that this is the way it is. So therefore, the law changes. As opposed to mourning, we're told you're not supposed to mourn on Shabbos, and we don't have exceptions for that. So that's why we don't mourn on Shabbos.
Okay,
And that's a good question. And in fact, we have a story in the Talmud about Rabbi Meir. There was Rabbi Meir whose sons died on Shabbos, and he refused to mourn the whole Shabbos. His wife didn't tell him. His wife didn't tell him that his children died because she didn't want him to mourn on Shabbos. So yes, it's already ancient. It's not just a new thing that the Shiva stops on Shabbos.
And then it stops altogether. It goes and.
Well, it would start.
If
Well, it
the Sabbath-
depends.
Like if a person dies and was buried on a Monday, you start the Shiva.
You would start the Shiva right afterwards, and you would go till the following Monday. But you'd skip Shabbos. Yeah, so Shabbos is counted as one of the days, even though it's not actually. You don't actually.
But you still would have a minion, or a minion come to your home, or.
Well, you shouldn't demonstrate any acts of mourning on Shabbos. So that's a challenge. It's not an easy thing, but that's because we don't have an exception. There's anytime we have a conflict with laws. So if we have the exception, then we could have one override the other. Otherwise, we can't. So another example of that is if someone has...
The laws of Shiva are not in the Torah.
Well, yes, but the customs,
Yeah.
the customs of Shiva, yes, that's also true. But this is a very nice example of where you have a convergence of a positive and a negative commandment. You can't really fulfill both, but the Torah says, the Torah mediates, so to speak, between this quandary and tells you that you are allowed to, in fact, you're supposed to do the bris milah on Shabbos, even though it means desecrating the Shabbos laws.
It's interesting that in the Talmud sometimes those who disagree are both listed. So for instance, when Yom Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, and there were some Talmudic scholars who said we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat because in the times of the temple they blew the shofar on Shabbat Rosh Hashanah, and we don't have the temple anymore, and so we don't do it. And another one said we should remember the times of the temple and blow the shofar on Shabbat, and it brings into an interesting question because most synagogues that follow halacha and have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so the second day they can blow on Sunday.
Yeah.
But for a synagogue that only has 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, then the participants miss the opportunity for the mitzvah of hearing.
But it's like when this past year and this year, Yom Kippur is on Shabbos.
Yom Kippur is on Shabbos.
So we don't say Davinu Malkeinu. So yes, even though it's only 1 day, but their law, that's we'll wait till next year, I guess.
But do we do Yizkor?
I don't remember. Do we do Yizkor?
It'll
I
be
think
morning,
so.
wouldn't it?
I think so.
Would it be a morning?
Well,
Easter?
it's more of remembrance. I don't know if it's a mourning. It could be even for a deceased parent or sibling from 50 years ago. I don't know if it's necessarily more. That's a good question. I don't even remember if we say Yizkor on Shabbos. It's a good question. But I think your point is very interesting. I spoke about this recently as well. That the Talmud, Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, which by the way was written where? Was the Babylonian Talmud written?
Where?
In Babylon, right?
Trick question.
Trick question. Okay, now where was the Jerusalem Talmud written? Jerusalem, right? Right? Wrong. That's my favorite trick question. The Babylonian Talmud was written in Babylon, but the Jerusalem Talmud was written in Tiberias. How do we know it was written in Tiberias? Because we know that the first Judenrat city, the first city devoid of Jews, was Jerusalem. Why? Because when the Romans destroyed the temple, they made the city into a city for Jupiter, or for Zeus, or for whatever, and there was no Jews living in Jerusalem. The Jews all lived in the north.
It's kind of like the New York Giants playing in New Jersey.
Something like that. So when the Jerusalem Talmud was written, the year given roughly is the year 320. We don't know exactly what year it was written, but it was written with the format of not really giving you dialogue as to dissenting opinions. As opposed to 180 years later when the Babylonian Talmud was written, it was written in a very different, radically different format because it gives you dissenting opinions. For example, you could have an opinion proposed and a page and a half of debate as to the validity and veracity of that opinion, and eventually it will discard the opinion. So wait a minute, where's the editors? If it's an opinion that we're not going with, we're invalidating anyhow, why would you bring it up? Because the Babylonian Talmud was written to not only teach you the law and the reasonings behind the law, but also to educate you on how to approach a certain law and to educate you about the opinions, even if they're wrong. And even if they're wrong now, maybe they were disproven for a specific reason, but we may in fact use them when the reason is not present. So that's why whenever there's a conflict amongst the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud, we always go with the Babylonian Talmud. That's why when we study Talmud, someone says Talmud, they mean Babylonian Talmud. That's why all the commentators all learned and studied and wrote on the Babylonian Talmud. Because for this reason, it always brings dissenting opinions, it always teaches us, it always has the dialogue, and it's not just a cold kind of recital of the roots of laws, but it's kind of showing you how they got there.
Could they ever use this? When they want people who did wrong went before a Sanhedrin, right? Or they
Yes.
went before the rabbis. Now, to prove their case is right, could say Vitelli do something, and I'm defending him, or maybe it would be another man or something like that. Are we able to pick evidence according to the Talmud or other rabbis, Rabbi so-and-so says that if you did it, whatever he did to prove him, free,
Yeah.
not guilty. Do people pick other rabbis' opinions, or